I was on the observation deck when Earth vanished from the star charts. Not exploded, not destroyed, just gone. One day we were the noisy newcomers in the Galactic Council chambers, arguing, trading, fighting over territory like any other upstart species. The next, our fleets were gone, our embassies abandoned, our worlds scrubbed clean. No messages, no farewells, not even a trace of human chatter across the commnets. We just left. I stayed behind. Not by choice. The fleet I served with was posted in the Rim territories, deep in alien-controlled space. By the time the withdrawal orders reached us, it was already over. The jump gates to human space were locked to outsiders, even to us stranded soldiers. They left us like ghost echoes in a hostile galaxy. I'd been stuck in the Council's shadow ever since, a token human observer, as they liked to call it. More like a prisoner with a fancy badge. I'd learned to keep my mouth shut, avoid eye contact with the big species, and ignore the whispers about the dangerous primates who ran away. Then, 3 days ago, they called an emergency session. The chamber was full. I'd seen heated debates before, but this was different. No posturing, no ceremonial nonsense. Every delegate leaned forward, speaking in clipped tones. The subject? Earth's automated defense grid. Decommissioning protocol must be activated, rasped the Virel ambassador, his mandibles clicking like knives on glass. It is a hazard to galactic security. Hazard. That was their word for it. Humanity had built something they didn't understand, and now that we weren't around to keep it in check, they were scared. They discussed it for hours, skirting the same point. Someone would have to press the button, the one that shut the grid down. Except, it wasn't just a shutdown switch. Every human knew that. It was the lock on a vault that should never be opened. I kept silent, even when I felt the eyes of lesser species flicker toward me, testing my reaction. Speaking wouldn't have mattered. The Council didn't listen to humans anymore. When the vote passed, it wasn't unanimous. The cautious species abstained. But it was enough. They authorized the activation. That's when they made their second mistake. They didn't send drones. They didn't send a low-level tech team. They sent a full delegation of their most arrogant leaders, live broadcasting the entire process to the galaxy, as if it were some glorious show of unity. I watched the feed from my quarters. My hands wouldn't stop clenching. That button, that single recessed console switch in the middle of the vault. I remembered the old Earth briefings, back when I was still in service. The words of my CO echoing. If the grid ever goes quiet on its own, the galaxy gets a second chance. If someone turns it off, the galaxy doesn't get a third. They pressed it anyway. The lights in the vault didn't go dark. They went red. In the chamber, the delegates froze. In my quarters, I stood up so fast the chair crashed behind me. The feed cut, not jammed. Cut. And in that silence, across the stars, something woke up. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of nightmares, but because I knew there wouldn't be any dreams worth having. The council complex was unusually quiet. No debates echoing through the corridors, no shouting delegates, no clicking insectoid claws against the stone floors. The air itself felt heavier. I didn't need a newsfeed to know why. Every ship in orbit above the council world was running silent. Every long-range sensor array was fixed in the same direction, toward the dark stretch of space where humanity used to be. It wasn't supposed to be dark. 3 hours after the button was pressed, the first reports came in. Not to me, of course. I wasn't important enough to be briefed. But you pick things up when you've been marooned this long. A few comm officers in the tower had loose lips when they thought a human couldn't hear their language. The automated grid hadn't shut down. It had changed. Every human-controlled system, from the smallest mining station to the largest planetary defense array, stopped broadcasting their old recognition codes. The gates locked in both directions, even to emergency overrides. Ships that tried to force an entry didn't just fail. They didn't come back. The Council thought it was some kind of malfunction. That was their first excuse. But then came the second wave of news, the part they tried to keep quiet. The malfunction wasn't limited to human territory anymore. In the hours after the button was pressed, human satellites, ones no one had known existed, flickered to life in alien space. Dead moons, barren asteroids, even drifting debris fields, all lit up with hidden hardware, beacons, relays, trackers. I remembered the old fleet phrase for it. Eyes open. When humanity wanted to see you, they didn't send a ship. They put the cameras in places you'd never think to look. The Council started to panic, though they'd never admit it out loud. Their diplomats tried to keep smiling, but the military representatives, the ones who'd seen humanity at war, had that look in their eyes. They knew. They knew the humans hadn't really left. I was summoned to the outer chamber the next day. The request came from the Kair Dominion's representative, a reptilian with scales like burnished steel and a voice like grinding metal. His name was Atruk Var, and I'd seen him once before during the last years of the trade conflict, when human destroyers had pushed his fleets back to their homeworld. "You will tell me what they've done," he said, no preamble. His eyes were narrow slits, his teeth flashing every time he spoke. I played dumb. "I'm just an observer. You stripped my clearance when—" He slammed one clawed fist on the table. "Do not play with me, human. You were fleet. You have seen what your kind hides." I met his gaze. "If I had, you think I'd tell you?" He didn't like that answer, but he respected it more than a lie. Atruk leaned in. "You left, silently. No war, no threats. That is not your species' way." I said nothing. Because he was wrong. Leaving without a word was our way, when we wanted someone to wonder why. He hissed, pushing a datapad across the table. The display showed a grainy image of a Council scout ship, or what was left of it. Half the hull was gone, edges blackened like it had been sheared off by pure heat. The timestamp showed it was from only 6 hours ago. "No transmission," Atruk said. "No distress signal, just gone. We found this in the wreckage." He tapped the screen, zooming in on a single piece of metal plating, and my gut went cold. It was human. Not alien, scavenged, not repurposed. Human-made, with the old fleet serial numbers still etched into the alloy. I shoved the datapad back toward him. "You pressed the button. You own the consequences." That was when I realized Atruk wasn't just angry. He was scared. Not for himself, but for the entire Council. "Do you think they are coming back?" he asked, voice low. I thought about the silence, the sudden reappearance of hidden satellites, the fact that the automated grid had gone red instead of black. And I thought about the stories they never put in the official history, the ones fleet veterans whispered about entire enemy fleets vanishing without firing a shot. "Yes," I said finally, "but not the way you think." 2 days later, the first real sign arrived. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a transmission. It was a warning. Council sensors picked up an object moving at impossible velocity from the direction of human space. Not warp, not hyperspace, just raw, unbroken acceleration, faster than any ship could sustain without tearing itself apart. It decelerated only once it reached the Council's own border worlds, sliding into orbit above an agricultural moon. The object was a single metal sphere, no larger than a fighter cockpit. It hung there in silence for exactly 13 minutes, broadcasting nothing. The local defense grid locked weapons on it, every species in range prepared for some kind of detonation. Then it sent one signal, a single burst transmission, before vanishing again, shooting back toward the dark. The signal contained just one thing: coordinates. The coordinates pointed to the Council homeworld, and below them, in perfect Terran standard. You opened the door. We'll walk through. Panic doesn't look the same for every species. Some pace, some hiss, some bellow. In the council chamber, it was chaos without the noise. Delegates speaking over one another in dozens of tongues, none of them making sense. Military leaders scrambling to requisition fleets that weren't ready for war. Atruk Var found me again that evening, dragging me into a private corridor. "They are coming here," he said flatly. "They told you they were," I replied. "We must negotiate." I laughed in his face. "Negotiate? You triggered whatever it is they left behind. You pressed their fail-safe. You think they'll sit down for tea after that?" He bared his teeth. "If they destroy us, they lose the Council. The unity of the galaxy." "The unity of the galaxy," I cut in, "is what they just decided wasn't worth keeping." He didn't answer that. Because deep down, Atruk knew the truth. The Council was never unity. It was an empire wearing a friendly mask, and humans had seen behind it. The first human vessel arrived 3 days later. If you could even call it a vessel. It didn't match any fleet design I'd ever served on. No heat signature, no visible thrusters, no drive plume. It was just a black shape against the stars, matte and lightless, the kind of thing your eyes tried to slide off. Every scanner said the same thing. There was nothing there. And yet it filled half the viewport when it stopped in orbit. No hails, no identification codes. Just silence. That silence. I'd heard it before. In the lull before an ambush. In the seconds before the first shot. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of someone deciding your fate. The Council scrambled everything they had. Defense platforms, warships, even old ceremonial guard craft. I knew it wouldn't matter. Humanity didn't arrive unless they were ready to decide something permanent. I was brought into the chamber by force. Atruk's doing, no doubt. He wanted me as some kind of translator, or maybe a bargaining chip. The Council's supreme speaker tried to look composed, but his eyes darted toward the holoscreen showing the human ship every few seconds. "We invite you to parley," the speaker said into the chamber mic, his voice translated into standard. The reply came instantly, not from the ship, but from inside the chamber's own comm system. "You've already spoken," the voice said. It was male, human, calm in a way that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You pressed the button," the voice continued. "You told us what we needed to know." The speaker swallowed. "If there was an error—" "There was no error," the voice cut in. "You confirmed what we always suspected, that without us, you'd reach for control of what you didn't understand." The chamber was silent. Not even Atruk moved. The voice didn't raise its tone, but every word landed like a hammer. "You will leave our systems untouched. You will cease all expansion beyond your current borders, and you will dismantle every weapon capable of crossing interstellar space. You have one rotation to comply." The speaker tried to rally, forcing his voice into something resembling authority. "If we refuse—" The lights in the chamber flickered. Every comm panel went dead. And when they came back, the human voice was gone, replaced by a single image on every screen. A Council capital ship, drifting. Lifeless. The timestamp showed it had been destroyed 2 minutes ago. I didn't need to ask where. It was parked in orbit over one of the Council's richest core worlds. Atruk looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes I never thought I'd see from a Care warlord. Not anger, not defiance. Submission. They didn't meet the deadline, not because they were brave, because they were stupid. I could see it in the council's war room the next morning. The delegates clustered in hissing little circles, their voices low but urgent, their eyes darting between holoscreens like nervous prey animals. They weren't preparing to dismantle their weapons. They were preparing to hide them. It was the same mistake I'd seen on battlefields across the galaxy. The belief that if you tucked your arsenal behind thick enough walls, if you buried it under enough decoys, you could make a predator forget you had teeth. Humans didn't forget. Atruk Var found me again before midday. He didn't drag me to a quiet corner this time. He barged into my assigned quarters without so much as a knock. His scales were darker than usual, a clear sign of agitation. "They are demanding we cut our claws," he said without preamble. "The council cannot agree to this." I leaned back in my chair. "Then you'll get the alternative." His jaw clenched. "You think they will kill us all?" I shook my head. "Not all, just enough to make the rest understand." He paced the room, tail lashing against the floor. "They are bluffing. A single ship, a voice on a comm channel. They wish to frighten us." I almost laughed. "Atruk, you've fought us before. You know what we can do with a single ship." His pacing slowed. "If they destroy the council, they destroy order, trade, stability." "Order," I said, "is what they just proved you can't be trusted with." By the second day after the deadline, the council homeworld's orbit was packed. Every allied fleet that could limp here in time had arrived. Warships from a dozen species, bristling with weapons, their hulls gleaming like they thought it mattered. To the untrained eye, it looked like strength. To me, it looked like a firing range. They put me in the observation gallery during the defense coordination meeting. I wasn't invited to speak, but I didn't need to. The whole thing was theater anyway. They talked about overlapping fire arcs, shared targeting grids, joint command protocols. They didn't realize that none of it mattered if the humans were already inside their systems. I'd been in fleet long enough to know, if the black ships were here, then so were the ghosts. The invisible probes, the silent interceptors, the code worms crawling through their comm networks. Every battle plan they made was already on a human screen somewhere. And then, almost exactly to the second of the original deadline, the lights dimmed. Not flickered. Dimmed. Power still flowed, systems still ran, but every lumen in the room bled away until the chamber was lit like a funeral vigil. The screens went black. Then a single line of text appeared, in Terran Standard, on every surface in the room. "We warned you." The first strike didn't come here. It came 40 light minutes away, at the orbital shipyards over Istral Prime, the largest weapons manufacturing hub in the sector. One moment the yards were full of half-built dreadnoughts and cruiser frames, swarming with repair drones. The next, every fusion reactor went critical at once. There was no explosion. That was the human touch. They didn't waste energy turning ships into fireballs. They turned them into slag. Hulls melted in place, superheated metal dripping into the void like candle wax. No debris, no survivors. Just silence. Within an hour, every other major weapons facility in the inner systems suffered the same fate. No matter how deep underground, no matter how well guarded, they were simply gone. The council chamber descended into chaos. Some screamed for retaliation, others for surrender. A few, the smarter few, simply sat in silence, staring at the floor. Atruk was among the screamers, not out of panic, but out of pride. He couldn't imagine bending the knee, even when the blade was already against his throat. He turned on me when the meeting broke. "You knew they would do this." I nodded. "They gave you a choice. You picked the one that ends badly." They are proving they are tyrants, he spat. I leaned forward. No, Atruk. They're proving they were right to leave. That night, the human voice returned. Not in the council chamber, but in my quarters. Captain Hale, it said. The sound froze me where I stood. I hadn't been called that in years. Not since before I was stranded here. Not since before they locked me out of the fleet entirely. I turned slowly toward the comm terminal. The screen stayed dark, but the voice filled the room. You've been watching, it said. Yes, I answered. You understand why we left. It wasn't a question. I swallowed. The council was always going to press that button. They had to, the voice said. We needed to see it happen, to see how fast they'd reach for it and what they'd do after. There was a pause, and then, you're coming home. The words hit harder than I expected. Home. After all these years stuck here, half a relic, half a prisoner, I'd almost forgotten what that felt like. How? I asked. You'll know when it's time. Until then, you watch. You listen. You remind them you're still here. The voice cut out. The room was silent again. But I knew then, whatever the humans were doing, whatever their endgame was, I was part of it now. The next day, the humans stopped targeting weapons. They started targeting people, not civilians, not random strikes, only council leadership, a governor here, a fleet marshal there. Every death was surgical. No collateral damage, no missed shots. Sometimes it was a shuttle accident. Sometimes a sealed chamber that suddenly vented to space. Sometimes a simple cardiac arrest in the middle of a meeting. Within 72 hours, 1/3 of the council's senior command was dead. The rest began to break. You could see it in their posture, the way they spoke, the way they stopped making eye contact with one another. They didn't know who would be next, and more importantly, they didn't know how to stop it. Atruk came to me again, but he was different now, quieter, measured. What do they want? He asked. They already told you, I said. Stop expanding. Break your weapons. Stay out of human space. His jaw tightened. And if we do? They leave you alone. And if we do not? I looked him dead in the eye. Then you stop existing. By the end of the week, the fleets that had come to defend the Council homeworld began to slip away, one by one. No orders were given, no public announcements made. Ships just left. No one wanted to be the one in orbit when the humans decided the deadline was over. I heard whispers in the corridors, of entire sectors declaring neutrality, of worlds offering to dismantle their own arsenals before the humans asked. The Council's unity was shattering, and the cracks were spreading fast. That was when the voice came back. Captain Hale, it said again. I'm here, I answered. Time to come home. They came for me at midnight. Not soldiers, not a fleet, just a single black craft, small enough to fit inside a freighter bay, silent as the void. It hovered outside my quarters' viewport, no lights, no markings. The airlock cycle engaged without me touching a thing. I stepped inside without looking back. The interior was familiar. Not in design. This was newer, sharper, quieter than anything I'd served on, but in feel. The air smelled like earth steel. The hum under my boots was the same deep vibration I'd felt in every fleet ship. The pilot never spoke, never removed their helmet. They didn't have to. I knew we were going home. As the council world fell away beneath us, I looked out across the starfield, and for the first time in years, I saw the faint, shifting distortion of the Black Fleet moving alongside us. Hundreds of ships, invisible to every alien sensor, their formation tight and perfect. We weren't retreating. We were advancing. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of a reckoning the galaxy wouldn't survive unchanged. The jump into human space was nothing like the alien gates I'd been stuck with for years. No flash, no ripple, no gut-lurching sense of being pulled through a straw. It was like blinking. One instant the stars outside were scattered and cold. The next they were sharp, bright, arranged in patterns I hadn't seen in over a decade. We'd arrived. I pressed my hand against the viewport. The constellations were familiar, but not the same. As if someone had taken the old map of human space and drawn over it in darker ink. Whole sectors that had been bustling colonies before were now empty black voids on every chart. And yet, here, inside the Black Fleet's perimeter, there was light. Not scattered random lights like alien trade routes, organized, geometric, whole star systems lit up with human infrastructure. The comm in the cabin crackled for the first time since I'd boarded. "Welcome back, Captain Hale." It was the same voice from the council chamber, calm and measured, but now it carried something else. A weight, a familiarity, like an officer greeting a fellow soldier home from the field. "Where are we?" I asked. "The core," the voice replied. "What's left of it, what we rebuilt." The craft angled toward a world that made my throat tighten. It wasn't Earth. I knew that before the nav data confirmed it. But it might as well have been its twin. Blue oceans, green land masses, cloud banks rolling slow over continents. Cities shone along the coasts like necklaces of firelight. It looked alive and untouched. We descended toward a landing platform bristling with defense arrays. Every gun tracked us for a heartbeat before cycling away, like an animal sniffing a familiar scent. The landing was smooth, the airlock opening into a corridor lined with uniformed personnel. Human personnel. The first man who stepped forward was tall, broad-shouldered, haircut short in the old fleet style. His uniform was black, marked with no insignia I recognized. But when he extended his hand, I took it without hesitation. "Commander Rane," he said, "welcome home." I wanted to ask where home even was anymore, but the words caught in my throat. "You've been out there too long," Rane said, reading my expression. "Come on, you need to see what we've built." The facility wasn't just military. It was civilization. We passed training yards where recruits drilled in perfect unison, hangars where black-hulled ships were maintained in silence, databanks the size of buildings humming with activity. Beyond the base's perimeter, I could see civilian districts, people walking, children playing, markets open in the sun. It was jarring, seeing peace alongside the machinery of war. Rane led me into a briefing chamber. The lights dimmed, and the system map came up. Not the sanitized public version the council used, but one that was alive with movement. Human-controlled space glowed in deep crimson, spreading like veins through the void. "This is why we left," Rane said. The display shifted, showing council territory overlaying ours. The red stopped neatly at their borders. For now. Between the two lay a wide stretch of black, unclaimed space. "They were getting too close," Rane continued. "Expansion disguised as exploration, resource exploitation under the banner of unity. The button they pressed wasn't an accident, Hale. It was a test. They wanted to know if they could control what we left behind." I nodded slowly. "And you wanted to know if they'd try?" Rane's mouth curved into a humorless smile. "We knew they would. That's why we left the way we did. Suddenly, completely. We didn't want them preparing for the moment they decided to reach for it. Now we know they can't be trusted with their own borders, let alone ours." I stared at the map. "So what now?" "We do what they've forced us to do," Rane said. "We hold the line. And if they push again, we erase the line entirely. The days that followed were a blur. They debriefed me for hours. Every council policy, every ship movement I'd seen, every whisper I'd overheard in those endless years as their token human. I told them everything. Every insult disguised as diplomacy. Every quiet discussion about dismantling our defense grids. Every attempt to study what they didn't understand. When the debriefing ended, Rane brought me to the Fleet Command Center. The Black Fleet was larger than anything I'd imagined. Hundreds of ships, destroyers, carriers, cruisers, all built without the ornamentation alien ships loved so much. These were pure war machines. No wasted space, no bright colors. Every hull was the same matte black, swallowing light, refusing to be tracked. "They can't detect us until we want them to," Rane said, "and when they do, it's already too late." I couldn't hide the pride in my voice. "Fleet's come a long way." He gave me a sidelong look. "Fleet isn't what it used to be. This is the Accord." I frowned. "Never heard of it." "You wouldn't have," he said. "It's what humanity became after we stopped pretending the Council would ever treat us as equals. Every colony, every ship, every outpost, united under one command. No bureaucracy, no politics, just survival." I thought about the Council's endless debates, the way they stalled decisions until they were useless. And here, humanity had built something lean, decisive, and fast. "You've been waiting for this," I said. Rane didn't answer, but his silence was enough. That night, I stood on one of the outer decks of the command tower, looking up at the stars. I thought about the Council, about Atruk Var, about the other delegates, about the fleets they'd scraped together in a show of defiance. I wondered if they'd realized yet that this wasn't a standoff. It was a countdown. A soft footstep behind me made me turn. It was Rane. "When the order comes," he said, "we'll move fast. You'll be with the first wave." I studied him. "You sure you want a man who's been living with them for a decade?" "You've been living among them," Rane said, "not with them. And we need someone who understands how they think." He stepped up beside me, looking out at the same stars. "You know what they'll do when we strike?" "Pretend they're surprised," I said. He smiled faintly. "Exactly." For the first time since I'd left human space, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, that wasn't in the cards anymore. But purpose. The Council had pressed their button. Now it was our turn. 3 weeks after I set foot back in human space, the order came. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't broadcast across the fleet in grand speeches. It arrived as a single coded phrase, burned into every ship's comm feed at the same moment. "Advance the line. No more maps, no more debates about where the border was. We weren't holding anymore. We were pushing." The first wave formed in silence, not the nervous kind, but the focused kind. Hundreds of black-hulled warships drifted into attack formation like predators circling a herd. No bright, running lights, no comm chatter, no visible heat plumes. I was aboard the Ravager, a spearhead destroyer built for speed and precision strikes. My station was forward observation, the same role I'd filled in the old fleet, but this time I wasn't reporting to a council desk officer halfway across the galaxy. I was watching for myself, for my own people. Rane stood on the command deck beside Captain Dresk, a man whose calm made you believe the ship could fly through the heart of a star and come out the other side. "Target system confirmed," Dresk said, his voice low. The holomap bloomed above the deck, council territory, with one star pulsing red at the edge. Yarnath, a logistics hub. Not a fortress, but important enough that its loss would bleed them. "They'll expect a siege," I said. "Months of cutting supply lines before an assault." Rane glanced at me. "They won't get months." We dropped into Jarnath space without warning. No gate transit, No approach from the edge of the system. The Ravager and her sister ships punched in less than half a light minute from the station's orbit, close enough that their defense grid didn't have time to spool up before the first salvo hit. The Ravager's main guns didn't fire shells. They fired holes, slugs wrapped in distortion fields that ripped through armor without even touching it, turning matter brittle and useless. I watched the first round tear a Council frigate in half, the two pieces drifting apart before the crew even realized they were dead. Council comms went wild. Distress calls, targeting orders, panicked demands for reinforcements. They still didn't understand that by the time you could call for help against us, the fight was already over. Within 11 minutes, their fleet was gone. Not retreating. Gone. The logistics station was intact, its weapons never fully powered. Dresk ordered a boarding team, not to capture it, but to drain its databanks and plant charges in the core. "Why not keep it?" I asked. Ronnie didn't look away from the viewport. "We don't hold what we can take. We show them we can take it anytime we want." The news of Yarnath's fall hit the Council like a blade to the spine. We intercepted their secure channels, and I listened as their delegates screamed at each other, the cracks in their unity widening by the hour. Some wanted to fortify every world. Some wanted immediate peace talks. A few, the old war breeds like Atruk Var, wanted vengeance. The Accord didn't wait for them to choose. Over the next 6 days, we hit 5 more targets. Not major cities, not political capitals, just enough to break the spine of their supply chain. Outposts, relays, refueling stations. Places they thought were too far inside their lines to be touched. Every strike was the same. We appeared, hit hard, vanished. No occupation, no drawn-out engagements. By the time they scrambled ships to respond, we were already somewhere else. The real turning point came on the 7th day. We'd just finished gutting a weapons foundry on the edge of the Cyril cluster when a Council fleet actually managed to meet us head-on. They came in heavy, 20 capital ships, twice that number in escorts, all converging on our vector. They must have thought they'd caught us mid-retreat. Dresk didn't change course. Rane didn't flinch. "Bring us into the storm," Dresk ordered. We cut straight into them. Alien fleets fight like fencers. Elegant, measured strikes, careful parries. Humanity fights like a bar brawl in zero gravity. The Ravager plunged into their formation, guns chewing through escorts like they were paper, while our point defense turrets shredded incoming fire before it could reach the hull. But the real killing blow wasn't our guns. It was the black net. The moment we were inside their formation, Rane gave the signal. Our ships dumped millions of micro-drones into the void, each no bigger than a coin, each carrying enough processing power to burn through a warship's fire control systems in seconds. Within minutes, the Council ships weren't shooting at us anymore. They were shooting at each other. I watched a Council destroyer rake a friendly cruiser stem to stern, its captain screaming on an open channel about phantom contacts and false locks. It was beautiful in the ugliest way possible. When the last alien ship went dark, the Ravager didn't slow down to finish them. We just kept moving, leaving the wrecks to drift. After the battle, Rane pulled me aside in the war room. "They're breaking faster than we expected," he said. "This won't end in years, maybe not even months." "Good," I said. He studied me for a moment. "You don't want it over too fast?" I didn't answer. Because he was right. I wanted them to feel this, the same way humanity had felt the weight of their arrogance when they pressed that button. "They'll turn on each other soon," Rane went on. "Some will make deals, some will try to flee. That's when it gets dangerous." "How?" I asked. "Cornered prey doesn't think. It lashes out." The lash-out came 2 days later. A Council task force hit one of our listening posts on the very edge of human space. They didn't get far. The post's automated guns chewed through them before they reached orbit. but the attempt told us something. "They're looking for a way in," Rane said over the map. "Not to win, just to hurt us, to make us bleed." "They won't," I said. "They might," he replied, "which means we have to make sure they don't have the time." That night, Dresk called the bridge crew together. "Next target is Atruk Var," he said. I blinked. "Atruk's not a planet, he's a symbol," Dresk cut in. "One of the last council leaders pushing for war instead of surrender. He's holding them together by sheer will. If he's gone, they won't have a war faction anymore." "And you're sending us?" Dresk's eyes were cold. "You know him. He knows you. That's why it has to be us." I thought about Atruk, about the steel in his voice, the stubbornness in his eyes even when he was scared. Killing him wouldn't just be a military strike, it would be personal. And I realized I didn't care. The Ravager set course without fanfare. We'd be in his system in less than 2 days, moving in the shadows like we always did. Only this time, I wasn't just an observer anymore. I was the knife. Atruk Var's homeworld wasn't what I expected. I'd imagined some fortress planet, all jagged defense stations and weapon platforms bristling in orbit. Instead, it was quiet. Too quiet. The surface was mostly ocean, dotted with small island continents, the kind of place you'd think belonged to a peaceful trading species. But I knew better. The Kyer Dominion wasn't peaceful. They were predators who'd learned to dress like merchants when it suited them. The Ravager dropped into the system under full cloak. We drifted past the outer patrol routes, ghosting through the dark like a shadow that shouldn't exist. The scanners swept once, twice, and I was about to tell Rani the place looked almost undefended. "Wait," I said, leaning over the sensor feed. There they were. Not in orbit, but buried. Dozens of thermal signatures hidden beneath the oceans, faint enough that they wouldn't show on a standard sweep unless you were looking for them. "Subsurface launch bays," I said. Rani's jaw tightened. "Atruk's been busy." Dresk brought us into a high polar drift, staying clear of the main Kyer settlements. We could have fired from orbit, one precision strike, and Atruk would be vapor before he even knew we were here. But this wasn't just about killing him. This was about sending a message. Rani wanted him to see a human before the end. The strike team was small. Me, Rane, 2 infiltration specialists I didn't know. We took a drop shuttle that barely registered on planetary sensors, skimming the upper atmosphere before diving into a storm system that hid our descent. Atruk's residence was exactly where I'd pictured it, high on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the kind of place a warlord chose when he wanted the horizon to look like something he could conquer. We landed in the shadow of the cliffs, making the climb in silence. The air was thick with salt and humidity, and the distant roar of the waves masked our movement. At the top, we found the outer perimeter, a low wall, more ceremonial than defensive. The Kyer liked to make their strength obvious, not hide it. Guards patrolled lazily, clearly not expecting an attack this far inside their territory. They didn't even have time to cry out before the specialists took them down. No noise, no mess, just gone. Inside, the residence was dimly lit, the walls lined with relics from Atruk's campaigns, weapons, armor, trophies taken from defeated enemies. My eyes caught on a shard of human armor, scorched and cracked. I wondered which battlefield he'd plucked it from. We found him in the main chamber, standing at a broad window that overlooked the sea. He turned before we could speak, and for a heartbeat there was no fear in his eyes, only recognition. "Hail," he said, his voice low. "They sent you." I stepped forward. "You made it personal." He gave a short, harsh laugh. "You think I pressed your cursed button? That was the Council's hand, not mine. I told them not to." I glanced at Rane, but Atruk kept his gaze on me. "They're hiding something from you," he said. Something in the deep void. That is why they wanted the grid down. Not to control it. To reach it. My gut tightened. What? Atruk's eyes flicked toward a sealed vault at the far side of the chamber. Records. Proof. I kept them when the council purged the archives. They would kill me for it, but you will kill me faster. Rane moved toward the vault, one of the specialists already pulling tools from his pack. Atruk stepped closer. If you take that, you will see why your kind cannot stay hidden forever. His voice was steady, but his eyes... There was something there I hadn't seen before. Not defiance, not even hatred. Resignation. The vault cracked open in under a minute. Inside was a single data core, old and scarred from decades of handling. Rane took it without a word. Atruk didn't move to stop us. He just turned back toward the sea. "You've already won, Hale," he said. "But you will wish you hadn't." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction. Rane's order came over comms. Extraction. Now. We were halfway down the cliff when the first alarms began to wail. Not ours, theirs. Through the storm clouds above, I caught glimpses of movement, shapes, dozens of them, breaking through the atmosphere in tight formation. At first I thought they were Kyre reinforcements, but they weren't Kyre ships. They weren't human either. The hulls were a dull, sickly gray, segmented like insect carapaces, and they moved with a precision that made my skin crawl. No comm signals, no transponder codes, just silent, perfect formation. One of them passed low over the cliffs, and in the brief flash of lightning, I saw the markings, alien glyphs I didn't recognize, burned deep into the metal like scars. The specialists froze. Even Rane's voice lost its edge for a heartbeat. "What the hell are those?" I asked. "Not from the council," Rane said. The ships banked toward the ocean, and then I understood. They weren't here for us. They were here for whatever Atruk had hidden under the water. We made it to the shuttle, punching through the storm into the upper atmosphere. From above, the scene was worse. The gray ships weren't attacking with weapons. They were cutting into the ocean, beams of pale light boiling the water as they drilled straight down. The heat signatures from below flared bright, like something massive was waking up. Atruk had said the council wanted the grid down to reach something. This was it. We broke orbit and linked up with the Ravager. Dresk was already in motion, ordering the fleet into a defensive wall between the planet and the incoming alien formation. "They're not hailing," Dresk said. "They're not even acknowledging our presence." "Then make them," Rane snapped. The first salvo from the Ravager slammed into the lead ship, and did nothing. No shields flared, no armor buckled. The round simply stopped, crumbling into dust before it reached the hull. "They're absorbing fire," one of the gunnery officers said, disbelief in her voice. "Then stop shooting at the hull," Dresk ordered. We shifted to targeting their formation points, the invisible threads that kept them flying in perfect synchrony. That worked. Barely. One ship drifted out of formation, faltering just long enough for two of our destroyers to rip it apart from the inside. But the others didn't break. They didn't scatter. They just adjusted, closed ranks, and kept drilling. I turned to Rane. "That data core Atruk gave us. We need to know what's in it." He didn't hesitate. "Go." I left the bridge, heading for the ship's secure analysis bay. The techs were already pulling the core's data into a live decryption feed. When the first files appeared, my stomach dropped. These things, whatever they were, weren't unknown to the council. They'd fought them before, lost badly, and according to Atruk's records, the only thing that had ever stopped them was us, not the council fleets, not some grand alliance, humanity. Back when we'd still been new to the galactic stage, we'd stumbled into a war no one talked about, a war the Council buried so deep that most of their own species didn't know it had happened. And when it was over, humanity had built the automated grid not as a defense against the Council, but as a barrier against them. The button the Council pressed didn't shut it down. It opened the way. By the time I got back to the bridge, the situation was worse. The drilling ships had breached whatever structure lay beneath the ocean, and the water around them churned with massive, dark shapes rising from below. Dresk didn't take his eyes off the tactical feed when he spoke. "We're leaving." "What about a Truk?" I asked. Rane's voice was like steel. "If those things are here for what's under his planet, he's already dead." We jumped out without ceremony, the Ravager and the other Accord ships vanishing into the void. The planet shrank behind us, storms still boiling over its surface. In the quiet after the jump, I looked at Rane. "We're not in a war with the Council anymore, are we?" "No," he said. "We never were." He turned toward the viewport, where the stars stretched out ahead like an endless battlefield. "They think we're their enemy. Let them keep thinking that, because the real enemy just woke up." The Ravager's war room was silent except for the hum of the holotable. No arguments, no posturing, just the quiet weight of people realizing they'd been fighting the wrong war. The decrypted files from Atruk's core were laid out before us in stark red lines. Dates, engagement records, fleet losses that weren't supposed to exist. The alien ships, the gray, insect carapace ones, had a name in those records. The Vader. It wasn't their real name, of course. Just the one the Council had given them during the war they never admitted happened. According to the files, the Vader had come from beyond the mapped galaxy, tearing into the Council's outer sectors with no warning and no demands. They didn't negotiate. They didn't even appear to acknowledge that other species were sentient. They harvested worlds, stripped them clean, and moved on. And then they hit human space. That's where the records shifted. Battle outcomes changed from total loss to Council victory. But the truth was in the after-action notes. Those victories weren't theirs. They'd been ours. Human fleets, back when we were still considered junior members, had hit the Vader harder than anyone else dared. Not because we were stronger, because we didn't fight their way. We didn't wait for reinforcements. We didn't defend in neat lines. We bled for ground, tore into them with close-quarters boarding actions, and when we couldn't win a system, we burned it rather than let them take it. It had worked. Barely. The Vader stopped advancing into our territory. That was when the grid had been built. A ring of automated defenses to seal them off entirely. The Council had called it a joint project, but the files made it clear. It was human engineering, human AI, human control codes. And the button the Council had pressed, it didn't shut the grid down. It told it to stand aside. Rane's voice broke the silence. So they woke the Vader, and they didn't even know they were doing it. I shook my head. Atruk knew. That's why he had the core. He must have been trying to stop them, but he couldn't say why without admitting the Council had lied to everyone. Dresk leaned over the table, his face unreadable. If the Vader breached the grid completely, human space is first in line. We've had 10 years to prepare, but if they come in force, we'll hold, Rane said flatly. It wasn't bravado. It was a statement of fact, but even I could hear the strain under the words. The next few hours were a blur of movement. The Accord didn't operate like the Council. No endless debate, no political wrangling. Orders were issued, fleets redeployed, supply lines tightened. Every black-hulled ship in the outer defense ring was put on immediate standby. I wasn't sent to my quarters to wait. Rane had me in the intelligence pit, running through the rest of the Corps' files, looking for anything the Council had missed the first time. Most of it was battle footage, raw, ugly, unfiltered. The Vader didn't just kill fleets, they unmade them. Ships didn't explode under their fire. They disintegrated, breaking apart molecule by molecule. Crews were taken alive when possible, but there was no record of any being recovered. And then I found something that made my skin crawl. It was a recording from the last engagement before the grid went active. A council carrier was under siege, its escorts already gone, Vader ships closing in from all sides. The carrier's captain was human. She didn't call for rescue. She didn't order a retreat. She rammed the lead Vader ship. The recording cut out in static before the impact, but the after-action report noted something strange. The Vader didn't advance for almost a month afterward, like they were thinking about it. That was when Dresk called me back to the bridge. The Vader ships we'd seen drilling into Atruk's ocean world had stopped. They'd taken whatever was down there and jumped out, not toward the grid, but around it, skirting the Council's mapped space entirely. "They're looking for another way in," Dresk said. "They shouldn't know one exists," I replied. "They shouldn't," Rane agreed, "unless someone told them." I didn't need to ask who. The Council had a habit of making pacts they thought they could control. If even one faction thought they could use the Vader against us, they'd try it. And they'd die for it. 2 hours later, the Ravager was in warp, headed for the grid itself. I'd never seen it up close before. From a distance, it looked like a faint shimmer against the stars. But as we closed in, the scale hit me. Titanic defense stations linked by invisible threads of energy, automated weapon arrays that could gut a dreadnought in seconds. "This is the choke point," Rane said. "If they break it here, nothing we've built will hold them for long." "Then we don't let them break it," I said. He gave me a look that was almost approval. "You'll get your chance." The first wave hit at the far edge of the grid. Not ships, probes, hundreds of them, darting in and out of range like they were mapping every inch of the defenses. Our guns shredded them, but for everyone we destroyed, another slipped just a little deeper. Dresk didn't waste time. "Bring the outer batteries online, and ready the interceptors." The interceptors weren't ships in the traditional sense. They were one-man weapons, little more than an engine, a cockpit, and enough firepower to make a cruiser nervous. Pilots who flew them had the highest casualty rate in the fleet. I didn't even hesitate when Rane looked at me. "I'm in." The launch was like being fired from a gun. One moment I was in the hangar, the next I was cutting through the void, the grid's defenses flashing by beneath me. My HUD lit up with incoming contacts, the second wave. These weren't probes, these were Vader assault craft, sleek and fast, their hulls crawling with shifting patterns that scrambled targeting systems. I picked one and dove straight at it. The targeting reticle danced, trying to lock, but I didn't need the computer. I aimed by instinct, squeezing the trigger when my gut told me to. The craft folded in on itself, vanishing into a burst of gray dust. More were coming. Too many. The fight blurred into pure survival. Dodge, fire, roll, dive, over and over, never stopping long enough for the Vader to pin me. Every time one of ours went down, I felt it in my bones. Then the comms lit with Rane's voice. "Hale, break off. Now." I didn't argue. I pulled up hard, letting the assault craft overshoot. That was when I saw it, a shadow bigger than anything else in the fight, sliding out of the void beyond the grid. It wasn't a Vader assault craft. It was something larger, older. The patterns on its hull didn't shift like the others. They pulsed in slow, deliberate waves, and every Vader ship in range broke off what it was doing to fall in behind it. The grid's guns turned as one, firing everything they had. The big ship didn't flinch. It just kept moving forward. And in the pit of my stomach, I knew this wasn't a battle. This was the beginning. The massive Vader ship crossed the grid like it wasn't even there. Every gun in range was pouring fire into it, kinetic, plasma, particle lances, and the thing just absorbed it, the pulsing patterns along its hull speeding up like a heartbeat under strain. The smaller Vader ships fell in around it, not protecting it exactly, but matching its pace, like they were escorting a monarch. In my cockpit, the comms were a mess. Gunners calling out new targets, pilots screaming warnings, tactical feeds flashing red with breach alerts. Through it all, Dresk's voice cut like steel. Form a cordon around that thing. Nothing gets past it to human space. I yanked my interceptor into a hard roll, sliding between two Vader fighters and burning one to dust with a close-range shot. My HUD lit with a new directive from Rane, Rally Point Gamma. And I didn't have to ask what it meant. Gamma wasn't defense. It was the kill box. The Ravager was already moving, her black hull slipping into the monster's projected course. Around her, half a dozen Accord destroyers shifted into perfect formation, their vectors overlapping to create a sphere of firepower. They weren't trying to outgun it. They were trying to trap it. I dove into the pattern, my interceptor becoming one of the smaller nodes in the net. The big ship didn't slow. The pulsing along its hull became faster, almost erratic, and I realized it wasn't ignoring us. It was reading us, mapping every position, every trajectory. "They're adapting," I called over comms. "That's why we move first," Rane replied. The first volley from the kill box wasn't aimed at the Vader ship itself. It was aimed just ahead of it, saturating the space with a cloud of micro-drones, thousands of them, each carrying a fragment of an old fleet virus designed to chew through alien targeting systems. I'd seen it work on Council ships before. I'd never seen it used on the Vader. The effect wasn't immediate. For 3 seconds, the monster kept coming. Then the pulsing on its hull stuttered. The smaller ships broke formation, some veering wildly, others freezing in place like their control systems had locked. "That's our window," Dresk said. "Hit it with everything." The grid's guns joined in, their fire converging into a solid wall. My interceptor's cannons burned until the barrels glowed white, every shot slamming into the same section of the Vader's hull. The surface began to fracture, not explode but peel away, revealing something underneath. It wasn't metal. It wasn't anything I'd seen before. It pulsed faintly, almost organic, and I realized with a sick twist in my gut that the ship wasn't just carrying something alive. It was alive. Rane's voice was low in my ear. "We break it here, or it learns." The Ravager surged forward, engines flaring for the first time in the fight. Her prow-mounted driver gun fired point blank, the slug hitting the exposed section with enough force to shove the massive ship off its vector. Cracks spiderwebbed across the pulsing surface, light spilling out like blood from an open wound. The Vader's response was instant and brutal. Every smaller ship still functional turned on the Ravager, spitting streams of energy that chewed chunks from her armor. My HUD lit with damage reports, hull breaches, fires, failing power conduits. But Dresk didn't break formation. "Hold it," he barked. "Every second we hold, we carve deeper." I swung back around for another pass, my targeting reticle locking on the fractured section. The Accord destroyers were hammering it, every shot widening the wound until, finally, the surface split entirely. Something spilled out. It wasn't debris. It wasn't crew. It was a swarm, smaller than the assault craft, more like living missiles, hundreds of them scattering in all directions. One streaked toward me. I juked hard, but it stayed locked on, weaving through my counterfire like it could read my thoughts. I only lost it by cutting power entirely and letting it overshoot before re-engaging. On the comms, pilots were screaming warnings. The swarm wasn't targeting ships at random. It was going for cockpits. "Pull back," Dresk ordered. "No," Rane said sharply. "We finish it now." There was a pause, And then Dresk's voice came back, grim. "All units, on my mark. Full burn into the breach. We overload it from the inside." My stomach went cold. That was a suicide tactic. But no one argued. The Ravager led the charge, diving straight into the torn section of the Vader's hull. The smaller Accord ships followed, pouring into the wound like blades into a joint. I stuck close to Ron's fighter, weaving through debris and the snapping limbs of whatever passed for the ship's internal defenses. The inside wasn't machinery. It was bone and sinew, and something that smelled like scorched earth. Every wall throbbed faintly, the light shifting in time with the pulsing we'd seen outside. We reached what had to be the core, a massive sphere of the same organic material, suspended in a cradle of metallic spines. "Mark it," Ronnie said. I did, and every ship in the breach opened fire at once. The core buckled, the light inside flaring blindingly bright. The ship shuddered, its internal gravity going wild, tossing us against bulkheads and each other. "Out!" Dresk shouted. We punched back through the breach, the light behind us swelling until it filled my viewport. And then it collapsed, the entire ship folding in on itself in a silent implosion. When my vision cleared, there was nothing left but drifting fragments. The smaller Vader ships didn't retreat. They simply stopped, hanging in space for a moment before turning away in perfect unison, vanishing into the void beyond the grid. On the Ravager's bridge, no one cheered. We'd killed something huge, but we all knew what it meant. We just told the Vader exactly how we fought. In the war room later, Rane stood at the head of the table, the holomap of the grid glowing between us. "They'll be back," he said, "and next time they'll come with more than one of those things." Dresk nodded. "Then we use what we've got left to make sure we're ready." I glanced at the Council territories on the map. "And them?" Rane's eyes were cold. "They still think we're their enemy. Let them. They'll fight harder that way, and when the Vader turn their attention to Council space, they'll buy us the time we need." It was brutal. It was cold. It was exactly the kind of thinking that had kept humanity alive this long. Hours later, I stood on the Ravager's observation deck, looking out at the grid. From here, it looked peaceful, just a faint shimmer against the black. But I knew better now. That shimmer wasn't a wall. It was a warning. The Council had pressed the button. They'd opened the way. And humanity, the Accord, was the only thing standing between the galaxy and the thing that had just tested our defenses and lived to think about it. For years, the aliens had whispered about us as the dangerous newcomers who didn't know their place. Now, they were about to learn our place was anywhere we decided to hold. And when the Vader came back, and they would, they'd find out why humanity never truly left. We didn't vanish into the dark to hide. We left to sharpen the knife. And now, the knife was ready.